Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We are joined by Behaim IT Solutions to discuss the results of an exciting collaboration between TIBCO and Behaim that allows you to automatically generate, share, and discover technical documentation for your TIBCO solutions. Next slide. Just a quick disclaimer, the material within this presentation is the property of Cloud Software Group and is for informational purposes only. Next slide. Our speakers today are Hugo Peters, our TIBCO product manager focused on the developer experience, Rory Miller, a software engineer at Behaim, as well as Bobo Ječmen, who leads the MakeDoc team at Behaim. Next slide. Rory will kick off this presentation with some background information on why it is so important to generate and maintain up-to-date product documentation. Then we'll kick things over to Bobo to discuss how to use MakeDoc to automate the generation of technical documentation for your TIBCO solutions. And then Hugo will end things today by showing how to easily integrate MakeDoc with the TIBCO Developer Hub so that you can create that single and centralized repository for all of your documentation. And with that, I will go ahead and pass things over to Rory.
Hi, everyone. So the importance of technical documentation. Technical documentation is documents that show what the code or application is doing without having to go deep into the code itself. And so the main advantage here of technical documentation is the ability to quickly understand what is going on inside of your application without having to have a technical background. So as we can see on the left, there is a Java class of a calculator, and without knowing how the Java code works, we can see what the calculator does and what each of the methods inside of the calculator can do. What this allows is for quickly onboarding of new team members so that they don't have to deep dive into the code to understand what they're going to be working with. Along with there is nice documentation that can be shared outside of the developer ecosystem. So you can bring back your documentation to the business, and if they're not technical people, they'll still be able to gain use from the documents that we have. So there are forms of document generation that can be done automatically, such as using JavaDoc for Java code or PyDoc for Python code. There's also open API specs that you can use to document your web services. And all of these allow for documentation to be generated based off of the code that you have written. And so what we have here is a CI/CD pipeline that has the document generation as the third step in the pipeline. So after the code is built and tested, we generate the documentation, and then we deploy the actual code and generate the report. And so now we have the running code and the most up-to-date documentation from that code available that can be published to a web server or stored back in the Git repository, however you choose to store and save your documentation. It can be done automatically and built into your CI/CD pipeline. So most of these automatic documentation tools work by reading the code, the comments that you put in your code. So well-commented code will lead to good automatically generated documentation, and will save you time in the long run of having to generate that documentation later. And so I would like to introduce Bobo, who is going to talk about documentation generation with MakeDoc.
Hello, thank you very much, Rory. Let me talk about MakeDoc a little bit. So technically, what MakeDoc is and what it does. MakeDoc is nothing else than a documentation tool providing some automatically generated documentation and code review and analysis of some TIBCO projects. So basically, Rory mentioned Javadoc or PyDoc. So it's similar. It generates a documentation which can be then used or exposed somewhere or shared with your coworkers. On the input, MakeDoc accepts enterprise archives or source code from the file system, or, for example, a code which is placed somewhere in a Git repository or any other version control system repository. This can be adjusted. And then MakeDoc takes this code or enterprise archives and it produces a documentation in various formats by its purpose. So it is a printable PDF or editable Microsoft Word format, and also HTML and Markdown formats, which can be shared within the internet. And this makes MakeDoc very useful in larger companies. So technically, MakeDoc features can be divided into 2 layers. At the bottom, you can see which products are supported. Its benefit is obvious. So you can have the documentation available from one page, even for multiple projects. So you can imagine the situation that, for instance, in BusinessWorks 5, you don't have to open, if you have 10 projects, you don't have to open TIBCO Designer 10 times. You can use MakeDoc generated documentation from one page, and you will see all 10 projects documented, within one interactive web page. So this is similar to the Javadoc, and supported TIBCO products are Business Events, BusinessWorks version 5, 6, and also BWCE. And then iProcess and Active Matrix BPM. And last but not least is Enterprise Message Service. Icons on the top, or items on the top, indicate analytic modules, providing some smart extra information, which is the added value of MakeDoc compared to the raw documentation. Static documentation was clear, and I believe. So let's talk about those analytical features of MakeDoc one by one. So the first one is repository analyst. What it does is simply it compares 2 different versions. So you can imagine that you generate documentation from one version of your source code, and some other day you will generate a updated source code. So you will get another snapshot of your environment or your projects. And then you can take those 2, let's call them snapshots, and compare them. And MakeDoc will show you visually all changes. So what was added, what was removed, and what features or configurations were changed. This is very useful in many cases. I'll be talking about some use cases later on. So let's jump into other module, and this is quality assurance. Quality assurance provides you a code review. So basically, you have your source code, your projects, and then you MakeDoc has implemented a set of rules. If you combine your source code with those rules and apply the rules on the source code, MakeDoc generates a report which contains or consists of a list of all violated rules, and then also provides you a list of projects they are violating some rules. And because we also provide a API to extend the existing set of rules in MakeDoc, so you can create your own rules based on your naming conventions or your needs within your development team. It provides the report provides also a list of invalid rules in case that you make a mistake when adding your new custom rule, and then you are not notified, and you can fix easily the error, and that's it. So this module helps to keep your code or the quality of your code on a higher level. And last but not least is the cross-reference module. What does it mean, cross-reference? It simply shows relations between some TIBCO and non-TIBCO objects. So let me give you an example. You are doing an impact analysis, and you would like to see all processes. They are touching a SQL table in a SQL database. So you know the SQL table in which database it is. And using the cross-reference, you can list all processes. They are doing any statements into this table. So in case that you need to change the table, either add a column or change the type, remove it, or change it in any way, it is very easy for you to see what's the impact of your intended change. And then you can plan to update your BW processes as well. Another use case is that you are doing some troubleshooting, and you have a JMS queue or EMS queue, which is growing up. Messages are not being consumed. So what would you do? You can use MakeDoc. You can see all processes they are publishing, and also they are consuming or reading from that EMS queue, and you can review those processes. You can check them. So it significantly helps, when doing any kind of troubleshooting, even in production. So as we know, all features provided by MakeDoc, let's talk about how it can be useful, about some real use cases we are we are observing at our customers. So first benefit is that you have up-to-date documentation. You are providing your developers or other architects or other members of teams updated the documentation. They don't even need to have installed any TIBCO software. If they are looking for some information, they can simply open a web page with generated documentation and search for what they are looking for, investigate the implementation of processes or schemas with those SOAP actions, or any other resources. If you have new members in the team, you can simply provide them the generated documentation, and it helps you when onboarding new team members. Using QA module, you can improve the quality of your code, because you can implement the rules, checking and enforcing some of your standards. and if there is something wrong, if someone implements a process which is using, let's say, some connection resource and it is hard coding some timeouts, which is identified as not a good practice, you can use a rule which shows you all shared resources. They are using hard-coded timeouts or any hard-coded fields, and then you can fix those mistakes easily. If you use MakeDoc as a part of the pipeline, which Rory mentioned, MakeDoc can maintain the entire history of your changes. So, you know, you can review what was changed from the previous version using the repository analyst we talked about. I already mentioned improved troubleshooting when using the cross-reference modules and also the impact analysis. And this everything leads to a higher productivity. And when I mention CI/CD, MakeDoc, it provides also a command line utility, so you can include it into your pipelines very easily. All right, and let's talk about some options we have for MakeDoc. So basically, we have 3 licenses, 3 different editions. The first one is Developer, which is Eclipse-based GUI. It is usually used by architects or developers. They need to generate a documentation just by themselves and use it in a certain way. The other one is Server Edition. MakeDoc runs somewhere within a server. It provides a Jenkins-based GUI for the configuration and management and administration. And it can produce HTML documentation, which can be published within your intranet. And then we have also a lightweight container edition, which can be used, for instance, as a GitHub action, which I believe Hugo will show you how it works. I mentioned also supported products. So just a quick summary: BusinessWorks 5, 6, and Container Edition, Enterprise Message Service, iProcess, and BPM, business events. And if you are interested in this tool, you can contact me directly or using any of sources they are shown on the slide.
Okay, thank you, Bobo. And I will go on to the next section and talk about the TIBCO Developer Hub in combination with the MakeDoc tool. So first of all, what is the TIBCO Developer Hub? The TIBCO Developer Hub is, let's say, the centralized pane of glass for developers within the TIBCO platform. And the TIBCO platform is basically TIBCO's approach to platform engineering, which forms the single pane of glass for all of your TIBCO products/capabilities. If you want to know more about the TIBCO platform, we've actually done a webinar, the first one out of this Tech Talks series, specifically on the TIBCO platform. So if you haven't watched that one already, I would recommend you to go and watch that one. You can find out all that you can do with the platform and the control plane. But let's talk about the Developer Hub for a second. So the Developer Hub is basically for TIBCO developers, and it brings everything together for a developer, right? So you can have your list of APIs, you can have your documentation, you can have your source code, you can use templates to create new assets. You can manage your CI/CD pipelines, track them. And what's also very cool is that the Developer Hub is based on an open source technology called Backstage.io as part of the CNCF, originally started by Spotify, and on that topic, we've also done a webinar, the previous webinar. So if you're interested and you haven't seen that one, please go look. We do a deep dive into the Developer Hub itself and Backstage, the underlying platform of that. And we also have a look at templates and how to use them. But today we'll focus more on documentation and how you can bring documentation together for developers. So what is a very important notion inside of, let's say, platform engineering and a developer portal is this notion of DevOps, right? So that the developer is kind of more responsible for how things run in operation, and that the operator very quickly knows how things work, right? And a developer portal is a key asset of that. And that is because through a developer portal, you can very quickly find the resources. You know, you can find the documentation, you can see how things are happening because it's described there, and the documentation should typically will always be up to date with the code. But if you can't find something in the documentation, you can also see which person or which department is responsible for that specific component out of the architecture. And that's also nice because you can have a complete view of the architecture in the Developer Hub. So you have this architectural view. You can also have a list of APIs in your API catalog, and you can basically run templates. So you can basically create new components or do something called self-service integration. But today we'll focus on documentation. And about a year ago, when I was actually showing the Developer Hub to Rory on one of the events of TIBCO, I was showing him that you could show documentation inside of the Developer Hub, and he was talking about MakeDoc and the MakeDoc tool and how that documentation can be generated. And we started chatting, and we figured out that with MakeDoc back then, you could only create like PDF, HTML, and Word document-based documentation, but that the Developer Hub or Backstage basically runs on MD, so the Markdown format. So we did a technical discovery, and we basically made a change that MakeDoc can also support the output format of MD, which then in turn inside of the Developer Hub gets basically published as a web page, so eventually becomes HTML again, but it lives as MD files next to your code. And that's actually what I want to demo today. So I have a setup of the demo, this technical POC. I'm using BusinessWorks, so our integration product, and I'm using Business Studio. And in there, we are going to make a change to our code and then see that that code change basically results in a change of the generated documentation. So for that, we have GitHub, where the code lives. We have GitHub Action, where the actual MakeDoc tool runs. We have the Developer Hub that hosts the documentation, and then we have the browser that displays the documentation. So what we will do is we'll open up a BW project in Business Studio. We'll make a change to that BW project, and we'll commit that change into GitHub. That commit then results in this GitHub action being triggered and picking up that change and regenerating documentation and putting that back into the repository, which then gets picked up by the Developer Hub, and you can eventually show that in the browser. So here I quickly show the assets. So you have a BW CE project in Business Studio with the sources being in GitHub. There you have the documentation that can basically be kept sync, so inside sync with the actual sources by the MakeDoc tool. And then eventually we get the documentation pages in Developer Hub that are then searchable. So here you see that. So here you have that piece of code where we're going to make a change, and then eventually you will see that change in the Developer Hub. So let me go out of this and actually go into the demo. So here we have the Developer Hub, and inside of the Developer Hub, I have this homepage. On that homepage, I find my components. So I have a component here for the MakeDoc webinar, which I have the current documentation already. So I can open up this activator process, for example. And here I see I just have a log statement at the exception. So here I have the Business Studio, Eclipse. And what is very cool, by the way, is that I can also go directly to the Developer Hub from Business Studio. So I can open up the Developer Hub from Studio. So we've created an integration here. And if I close that, you will also see that you have a Developer Hub section here. But what we will do is I will basically take this log statement and I'll add it onto this exception handling just to show you that I can make a change. So I'll click on properties here and I'll change the name of that property. So I'll just give it change. Okay, so this is now changed. And we just want to keep it consistent. So I'll just get rid of the error by providing an empty message. And then I'll save this. And then you basically see for Git, you have an unstashed change, right? So we basically want to make this change now. So we'll press the plus here and we'll just say made a change. Okay, and I will say commit and push. And what happens now is that we have our GitHub repository here. And if I refresh this, you will now see that there is a change that was made. Now, because of that change, basically the action got triggered. So we have an action here that is made a change that is now running to build the documentation. So this will run for a minute or so. It will regenerate all the documentation and then we can open up the Developer Hub. So while that is going on, let's have a little look at what we can find in the documentation. So Bobo was showing you earlier the various components that you have in the MakeDoc tool. And basically you see that here. So here you see the cross-reference documentation, the quality assurance documentation, and the analyst documentation. So you can, for example, see the dependency tree for this JDBC connection. So let's say you use a database, then you can see which processes are all using that database. Or you have a process, then you can see the dependency between the process and all of the various schemas that are being used, for example. And you can also see the flow of the data. So how the data flows through the various components of the system. And also a database object. So where is that all being used from? All right, so let's see how it goes with the documentation that is still running. So give that a bit of time. And then it's actually committing that back into the repository. Let's see when that is done. Okay. So that looks almost there now. So let me just go back. So now we are at step number 3. So we have made the change, updated the sources. This is regenerating. And then we should be able to pick up that change. By the way, it's not needed every time to go and look at this GitHub action, but I just wanted to show you what's happening. So now it's stopping the container. And when that is done, basically this action now has run. So you can also see a summary of the actions that have run. And you see that this made a change basically now is completed. That means that on this side, if we open up the documentation, you will now see a newer version of this documentation is being prepared and will be available shortly. So what this means is basically picked up that there was a change. So it's now regenerating this sort of in the cache of the Developer Hub. This only needs to happen once, after this documentation has been changed. And then when that is done, we'll basically be able to refresh the screen. So now you see it's done. We can refresh the screen. And now if we go to this process here, you'll now see that this thing that we've changed basically has become part of the screen. Let me just zoom in a bit. So here now you see that that change actually is now part of our documentation. What is also nice, by the way, is that this documentation is now searchable. So we can also search for these things and you can actually find all of that information in the documentation. So of all of the projects that you have, you can search through all of them. Okay, last but not least, what is also very cool is that basically every time you make a change, there can be a comparison that can be done. So in this case, we can actually see what the change was, right? So if somebody else made a change and you just want to see, okay, I'm not interested in the entire documentation. I'm only interested in the actual change that happened during this commit. You can pick that up from the analyst documentation as well. And this is very cool because then you can basically track the changes and see what a person has changed, for example, when he put a new version of your integration flow into production. All right, so that concludes the demo. Let me just reiterate what we've done. We basically had the code in Business Studio. We made a change to that project that got committed to GitHub, which then got picked up by the MakeDoc container that regenerated the documentation. And then we had the documentation pages in the Developer Hub that we looked at with our browser. So with that, I would like to hand it over back to Kelly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hugo. If you are interested in learning more about the TIBCO platform and the Developer Hub, I'd encourage everyone on this phone call to reach out to your account representative or go to tibco.com/platform, where we do have additional information and resources available. And that concludes today's webinar. So thank you again for joining us.